What I really found interesting about the research structure of the report was we focused on looking at intent and, having illicit market as a specific designator versus gray market. If a user wants to sell or exchange a gun that they earned or an item that they earned in the game that they just don't want, the intent there isn't to like cause harm, and it isn't to deceive, and it isn't to exploit, right? And so I think oftentimes I'm really glad the report makes this nuance, because so often when people talk about gray markets or black markets, they lump all of these activities as, anything that breaks the rules as something that is quite bad. So for one, I always find it very interesting when consumers find their own mechanism to do the thing that they want to do. I think it's quite a strong message to game publishers and platform owners that if you are not paying attention to these unmet needs, they will find a workaround, especially when the intent isn't to harm. So somebody's like, if I just want to own a game, or if I just want to own this digital item, why can't I? And if the only reason is because we said so, and because we wrote terms of service and terms of agreements, maybe like that, are no longer reflective of the cultural norms of the time of exchanging and selling and buying stuff online, then consumers will make the judgment that that's not a very good reason, and they will just find ways to do it. So that's kind of the first point. The illicit market point, then you just get into this whole underground where you not only have like solo players, you're like petty crime, the guy that's going to try to get you to share your login password or share your credit card info, the type of scams that we've sort of seen since the beginning of, the Nigerian prince email scams. Like, this is kind of nothing new. You kind of have these small micro exploitations. What really fascinated me is how much some of these like trans crime syndicates have been using things like Fortnite, like in-game currencies to launder money, to hide their tracks of criminal activity, even in some cases to communicate with each other through channels that aren't being monitored as closely by law enforcement. And I think, crime has always been, the crime industry has always been very innovative in terms of finding ways to exploit normal things. And so when I kind of think of these, it's kind of odd, but when you think of these like very sophisticated, very dangerous crime syndicates that are buying and selling, V-Bucks in order to, it's not exactly congruent with the image of, these crime families you have, but that doesn't change or lessen the impact of the damage, which is they have found a mechanism in this gray bridge between online and offline where they're able to use virtual currencies and then have real world impact, and that enable them to pass hundreds of millions of pounds. And then you'll have the guys that, we talk about it in the report, that just use little hacks to mine, to accelerate the mining of the FIFA coins and things like that. But those to me are not as interesting as the organized crime networks, because that then you're seeing the attention of these huge global networks that are probably doing so much more that we can't see. And I think that raises some fascinating questions about regulation, about monitoring, about jurisdiction, about liability, like who is responsible for all of this. And that, I think, is going to be one of the biggest challenges for these companies and for game creators moving forward. So if you're creating a game in the public domain and it suddenly gets hijacked in some way for drug trafficking, we really hope the regulations are in place to make sure that like you're not liable, or the company's not liable.
Yeah, it's a fascinating